Jambe Yung La Sha Sa Lo Kongge Lo De Dim Nyen Den Nyetra Nam Da Rab Sra Ve Chi Nye Dun Gun Chi Jin Se Ni Je Tu Gra Le Bon Zen Kong Da Se Ve Chun Re Ma Re Du Gra Roso Gun La Bu Je Tar Ze Yin Lai Zhu Ju Yong Den Song Zhu Dre Che Zhu Nye Mo Nye Long Le Je Chao Zhong Zhong Ze Jin Ma Re Mu Sre Dung Re Nyu Gu Che Nye Chen Ze Ra Je Nam De Ne Ta Chen Sa Ju Tar Yen Den Lu Zo Ja Se Tu Yu Gu Chun Tra Chu Dan Chu Nye Jen De Da Le Mes Jambe Yung La Du Amara Bazana De Rum Zana De Rum Zana Amara Bazana De Rum Zana 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 Amara Bazana De Rum Zana 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 Amara Bazana De Rum Zana 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 Amara Bazana De Zeden Che Je Chen Ra Vezre Je Da Le De Mo Men Ba Rab Sra Ne Ka Dan Den Je Jong Lo Do Wa Ye Lo Je Po Be No Wa Za Do So That's all.
Mit trave mi takpa tokpa tang tongni tokpa ni dönchikrevi dönchik minna chepa kare yodan
Ta Traven Be Takpa De La Kwa Jib Sho Rwa Pen Kechi Gin Jur Shin Ban Der La Traven Be Takpa Song Dwa
laso
Ta Me Takpa Rang Ngo She Ba De La Tong Ni Song Dwa Tingi De Che Par To Zi Yo De Ta Dile Ta Dong Chara Ge Che
they are not well, first I should of course read out the question so that then everyone knows the question. It's as follows: realizing subtle impermanence and realizing emptiness, is it the same thing? If not, what's the difference? Subtle impermanence is about the fact that all things change continually, every split second, as it were. And emptiness is about the essence of impermanence, the nature of impermanence. So there is a difference between the two. The nature of impermanence is emptiness. The fact that no matter how subtle the impermanence itself as to its true nature is the one of essencelessness.
Perna Kechi Mide Yo Deva Te Trinkasan Tapshir Den Wongbo Joyur to Churtubrova. Dongbani Wongbo Joyur to Chutamberova.
Subtle impermanence can be perceived today by way of advanced technical equipment available to scientists. Emptiness cannot be perceived, no matter how advanced the technology one uses may be.
And
we daddy won't put you to jurpa.
Yeah.
And with perceived here, you have to keep in mind that one refers to perceiving something by way of a physical sense faculty. And that is possible in terms of subtle impermanence today by way of the advanced technology available. However, emptiness, no matter how advanced the technology, can't be perceived at all. Mm-hmm. Then we have the next question. De Nyalvekor kashe sungsong da Nyalva se kenti tandagi jikten le shempachik la kogoretam mi jultu keva longne mi kangal tuk tene dungal hachan shuk shempo nyongwa de la kogoretam.
Chetan tande no tang nyalwe no nika te semnang re le toppe
tanda no wasena jiktendi
mi
jiktendi
ya semnang rang re
mi jiktendan nyalwe jikten
chikpa chichang re
semnong re
sem pasha top chi shara chi re.
Now the question is, Khenpo spoke about the world of hellish existences. Is it a world we could actually be reborn in, or is it a metaphor? Is the phrase or the name hellish existences a metaphor for the great suffering we can experience as human beings? Well, both the world we live in, the world as we humans know it, and the various hellish existences are but mind. Impressions in the mind, impressions that manifest as a specific world, whether the world of human beings or any of the worlds of hellish existences, due to so-called karmic imprints or predispositions.
Tinika de semna yimba mahine nongone ji yebe ngaranzo denzin de yechirinda tande no dambare nyave no yang dambare.
Now the individuals who inhabit either the world of human beings or a hellish existence, those beings do not know that their world is simply the manifestations of a number of predispositions or karmic imprints. Those inhabiting these worlds are unaware of that fact. They therefore do not see the illusory nature of the world they inhabit. They instead see a real world, whether it's the world of human beings or a hellish existence. The worldview of the individual is the same.
Ti into Tandanga to Milayo Dunga Chitam Chambo Yina Young Never Dunga teach and Kankamare Janjurgian Chegiot Janjur Tunjurgian.
In terms of great suffering among human beings, one should know that no matter how great the suffering, it is very slight when compared to the various kinds of suffering that individuals in a hellish existence experience. The severity of the suffering in hellish existences surpasses the suffering of humans thousandfold.
Taking the Naranso Nanga Tina Pacing the Lambi by the Yina Me tend to Dungal Kande Chishoy Yang Dungal Te Rangit Serap went to Sakwell Sendela Sakwe Legend Namin Yimba Sanatang Telang Olinche Let Jongtabla Te Pejo Tangna Nyamba the Sanguishole Pejo Tangya Yedapch.
Now, as a Buddhist in general and a practitioner of Mahayana Buddhism in particular, whatever the suffering that's experienced, one would, in consequence of being of the Buddhist faith, know that the suffering at hand results from one's own actions, either in previous lives or in this life. One should acknowledge that and accept the suffering experienced on the basis of that knowledge and make use of the various methods that are available by way of which the past non-virtue can be remedied.
Penna Sanjay the Desson page on the Sena Tapana Tunchirge Nanda Yuja Keni Tola Takarina Tijete Jamakagre Tunchet la Yamelo Yena Yang
Keni did Trimakane Shamelo?
Yeah, that Yagmarwa, Nana Yargamarwa.
Tronki Kila.
Tronki Kili and Pana Misanchi Ganadi and Tikani the Yargamarwa. Yena Yang Kenite Shimba Sugi Shinkar Lushada, Loto Sanguchekroa. Naran Sola. Showen Nasa and Kangal Dungal Kari in a young.
You get it, but a young condition. Natsa
Tape Shabina, Missanchi Ginang La, Tola Salate, Yan Degmidoa. Tate Pakundo, Tene, Lut on the Luchagdoa. T. Lut Cosone, Shinkana and Chik Dabina, Loto Chia Lishira Pingaroa. Teaching the Gansola Mende Joge Nasa Dungal Karichumbi in the young. Te Sanjib Simji Tros Chershina Pia Yungremato Ganga Yungmata. Walin Chetumna
Sanjib Semgi Chetu Kursona?
Yeah, Sanjib Simgi Tro. At the ceremony legging. Pasha Jung Tanda in Samanda, send D. Lang and Batnam, D. You love me to a show, some persona Tang Shena.
That means Sarava.
That didn't deal at 10 and Yala and Roma girl.
Oh, Naranyala.
Yeah. yin semjin la yang tindawa mayongwa ta mangbo khajur juyorwa
this Sangigi Peri Tronki Kenid. Buddha Shakyamuni gave an example by way of which he attempted to illustrate what was just said. He told the audience at the time the following. Think about the fact that leftover foods, either in a household or leftover foods accumulated by an entire city, are always transported away from the city or the household. Why? Because as the leftover food is kept in the trash bin, it starts rotting and smell. Therefore, it's transported away. And we human beings call it trash, waste, something we don't want to have around, something we do not have use of in terms of city dwellers. However, farmers will gladly receive the collected food waste and process it so it becomes manure, which is then spread on the fields, and this contributes to a good harvest. So that which is not usable for city dwellers is very beneficial for farmers. In the same fashion, human beings, when encountering undesired circumstances, illness and the like, as was said, should acknowledge and accept what is happening and make use of methods by way of which the disease or whatever the suffering may be is remedied. At which point the unwanted situation becomes an aid which the practitioner can benefit from in order to make progress on the path of a bodhisattva. Also, the practitioner in this context would pray that the unwanted circumstances encountered ripen to the fullest extent, so that, for example, if that is suspected, a rebirth in a hellish existence is then avoided, and one may extend that prayer to include all other beings as well, that they go through the same, so that they as well are saved from unfortunate rebirths. One may even pray that by way of one's own personal suffering, that one's personal suffering will contribute to saving even others from a similar fate. Alltså. Ti pardone a me ngaltu tsu tene namsheti shise gente lypo CD lypo le töndula kogogen du som se ta semse kendi bempo mindu tene kangla tene nesa chik yu sigere
Pardon.
mare suponangla ne drogere va bardone ame ngautu tsune tene davagodang shapochu tene kie tene mitse koranro tene shi sekendi dige barto lypochik nesa redova lypo korang bemborava
Je.
segendo semdi beminrava
Je.
tene bemin gichuk nesa bempochik la kan di pensi gemare som de chiki segendo de kan de chik sipare
Titang une tere. Tumumai belegin del batre.
The question is, it was said that the mind enters the body at the moment of conception and exits it when death happens. The mind is immaterial, hence it cannot be located anywhere. Oh dear, now the page disappeared. Sorry. No, Safari cannot open the page. Oh dear. Can you give me the Wi-Fi? Let's see if it happens. No. Oh dear. Can you get my bag from the room? I have my telephone there. Outlook, we can't reach the internet. Oh dear. Settings are here. I think I can do it here. Mobile data, not connected. Wi-Fi. Password. It's connected now. Okay, then we get back. Okay. Oh dear. Tene trivas harpare vet han det. Len summa så.
Len shui.
Nge guryo.
Tumum jurma so. Tumum mai be legin del bari jiong ge ton xian na. Teching dar du xian na. De chama sem ge nong re che.
Now There are two answers to the question just asked, which would be, what's the connection between the physical body and the mind inhabiting the physical body? An answer that would in general be an answer as to Buddhism at large would be that there is, by way of karmic connection, or karmic imprints rather, a very specific connection between the physical body and the mind. Whereas if one look at Mahayana Buddhism alone, the answer would be that both the so-called physical body and the mind, the mindset in the present, that of a worldly individual, both are images in the mind stream. Both are simply impressions in the mind's eye, as it were.
这样的呢，学个那样，本来，但买个图，number 些把的书搞了。 Juji tender chok ha chang mong po go gre ma to pe simple tender mare.
Now if we begin with conception, as was explained earlier, the mind stream, having exited the physical body of the immediately preceding lifetime, enters the phase between death and a new rebirth, where, as it was explained yesterday, there is just a so-called mental body, not the kind of coarse physical body we have right now. And what happens at conception is that the worldly mindset, as it were, enters the womb of the future mother due to the force of the karmic connection that is at hand, the karmic connection with the two future parents. And for that to happen, namely conception, innumerable causes and conditions must come together. So there is at that point the synchronous meeting of innumerable causes and conditions that make conception possible. It's not as simple as if one were to walk through a door, as it were, and then enter a room that one walked, or the mind stream in the in-between state simply moved through the opening to the womb of the mother and then settled there. It's not that simple. There is a great number of causes and conditions that come together and make conception possible. And one also has to keep in mind, when the word mind is used, you have to understand that the word mind is used with reference to a number of mindsets. The mind isn't sort of a thing which is always the same, the mind as it were. There is the worldly mindset, there is the mindset of object orientation, there is the mindset called the body mind. There are many, many different types of mindset. And here, in terms of conception, the mindset is a worldly mindset. It's the context of the mind being governed by karmic imprints or predispositions that are about a worldly mindset. With all its complications, where its karmic imprints make for connecting with, in specific, the two future parents.
And this is called Shiptra Chinda Tene Gelong Gao Gishuben Donan Sinata Indicator Jurdu.
Gao Sanskrit Tola Kandishi. Gärna la pevde Erikon.
Payamar Payamar. Jamne de Kumche Chumare.
If one wants to find out about the details in this context, among other things, there is a sutra requested by Buddha Shakyamuni's younger brother. His name in the Tibetan translation is Gao, Gelong Gao. Gelong simply means someone of full monastic ordination, and his name translated into Tibetan is Gao. So Khenpo Rinpoche recommends that you read a translation of this sutra in order to get more details. Next question is about impermanence. Impermanence is often spoken of in a negative way, in connection with losing something. Can impermanence also be seen in a positive way, as a source of opportunity?
Positive short as some tangre. Nanzone Metapa Yemba Te Molinche Ti Tene Te Church Drumnanda. Milarepa Sonje Jo Zochi Metabo Gambatre.
Well, whatever is explained should be seen in a positive light. All of it are teachings with the aim of helping those on the path to enlightenment to make progress. So, even though some of it, in a worldly context, seem negative, one should sort of drop one's usual way of defining things, because any Buddhist teaching is or has the purpose of making for constructive progress. and that applies to impermanence as well. Now, in terms of impermanence, it's important to accept impermanence for what it is and embrace it. An example of someone who did just that is Tibet's great yogi Milarepa. And him accepting and embracing impermanence was the primary cause for him being able to attain Buddha, the enlightened state, in that very lifetime. So impermanence is something positive. It's an opportunity. However, as would be evident, it depends on how the individual, in which light the individual tries to understand impermanence. Whether it's in the regular worldly way, then if that is the case, then there will be that negative connotation. Whereas from the perspective of the Buddhist path, it's something very positive.
Pena yang thaya doje yang ne yang du song gdwa le dagar chi song nganzo metak pande dagar che daga na shinge dungar te dagar che ne tatte su dago japchen samno tang nang thubayina desu khanga te like shol chi ju yue de bare ma to nye sho chang ane samno tang ji yo mare
Kangi samju yomaris?
Kyun chang ki sho.
Oh, kyun.
Kar resna.
Yeah.
Metak ba de chuni ro ko. Yu jae kan yo maro.
Naso?
De pejo tang ba den yagu sho tik tok.
Now the Gyalva Karmapa Tayadorje has said on numerous occasions that it's important for a Buddhist practitioner to, as it were, own his situation, whatever the situation may be. As a Buddhist, one knows that whatever is at hand is the result of one's previous actions. So one actually is the owner of what's happening. As that what is happening is the result of what one has done in the past. It doesn't belong to anyone else. It belongs to oneself. One owns the present situation, whatever it may be. It's important to see whatever is at hand in the light of that. That one is the owner of what's going on, no matter how unpleasant it is. No one else caused it. You brought it about yourself. Therefore, you're the owner of it. And having understood that, you should, as a Buddhist, be able to deal with it in a constructive manner. So when looking at impermanence, or when looking at or experiencing various periods of suffering, it's important to look at both in a positive light. One shouldn't continually try to find the flaws with what's going on. Finding flaws that would point to that this is not fair, why is it happening to me, etc. That's not constructive. One can not make progress if one tries to find a way out of one's ownership. And impermanence is the nature of each and everything. One can't remove impermanence from reality. It's not possible. So it would be better to own up to it, accept it and embrace it and make use of it. What's the connection between impermanence and karma?
Karma the leni parundeva khans.
Mi takpatan leni gibala jelva kareedam.
Le korang betaparwa.
Well, impermanence is the nature of karma.
Penna ngesha ji tseba yina. Sa thangbo kunchosam thebe lo te thangbo chegro. Yina ga rogro ko.
La?
Penna kunchosam thebe lo te che. Tiang kejing me thingwa ganga degro mato meta ko shor rogro. Tene gola langban de se yaw kabla gochu de leji jirwa da de de gola langba yayate meta ko cha sa so ninkala lebdu jambal leyade meta ko cha sa so te kanga ranjin re do.
If one takes a simple example, such as paying homage to the three jewels, because of one's trust and confidence to them. It's traditional to fold one's hands and to begin with place them at the top of the head, then at the throat center and then the heart center, and then bow down and touch the forehead to the ground as an expression for one's trust and confidence in the three objects of refuge. Now, the mindset of devotion, the mindset of trust and confidence is in itself impermanent. That mindset is made up of a certain number of instances of trust and confidence. It begins, it goes on for some time, and then it ends. So, the mindset of devotion is an example of impermanence. And then you have the physical action of folding the hands, raising the two arms to the top of the head, and then moving the two hands folded, of course, to the throat center. Well, once the folded hands are at the throat center, the previous action of keeping them at the top of the head is gone. Impermanence has struck again, hasn't it? And then one moves the hands to the heart center, at which point the previous gesture is gone. Impermanence has struck again. And then one places the two hands and the forehead on the ground. The two hands are no longer folded even. Impermanence has struck again. Every single thing we do, whether we're looking at a mental event or physical action, is impermanent. Impermanence is omnipresent.
Chezan metangwa gne dang de jig chimbayina.
And to know this will be an opportunity for acquiring a great deal of good qualities if one owns impermanence, if one accepts impermanence, if one embraces impermanence. then that will be a door to developing a great many good qualities.
Mato chege ngaranso mise mang chewate saju nyejo chambyugela zoyor.
It's better to spend one's life like that, in the lap of impermanence, as it were, rather than doing what most people do. Planning for their next meal, what the meal should be, thinking about and planning for what time to go to bed at night in order to get up at a certain hour in the morning, and all the rest, such as wandering from A to B constantly throughout the day. It would be better to concern oneself with embracing impermanence than just wander from A to B constantly during the day and then give some thought to what to eat for lunch, what to eat for dinner, and at what time one should go to bed, and the like. It's meaningful to concern oneself with impermanence. From the practice of contemplation emerges a definitive knowledge. A definitive knowledge is therefore an impermanent conditioned phenomenon. How can this knowledge be definitive if it is impermanent? Well, Marita, Nishina, Tine Mita Pakanjin Sipare. Ni Parshepa. Da Triva tanken tigi trengösarva. Ni tsarne tine takpare trengösarva.
Yes.
Gyurvachi dogmare trengerva.
Tandate kavan yegursana. Lol yegurwa. Lo koranya kechi mera tingwachirwa. Ngepat kechi ngamal yore. Kechi ngamen nipate shepa kechi shimeten rogre. Yina ngepa chik pala doge de te shepa takpachang.
Well, I think it was just said previously in the context of the previous question. I can't remember exactly, but any mindset has a beginning, a duration, and then an end. So it is impermanent, and throughout its duration, the mindset in question, whether it's one of devotion or otherwise, is made up of a series of instances that in terms of time unit are very, very short. And that applies to a definitive knowledge as well. Now, the individual instances of the mindset if we start from the first, the definitive knowledge of something occurring for the first time during the first instance of that mindset, as it comes to its end, the ending of it has the impetus of coloring the next instance of that mind stream of devotion, of definitive knowledge. So the definitive knowledge is present throughout all those instances. Again, with respect to any mindset, and here the mindset of a definitive knowledge of something, it's not a matter of a single solid mindset where there is no change at all, where impermanence doesn't happen. It's a matter of that the mindset of a definitive knowledge of something is as impermanent as anything else. However, the definitive knowledge is present throughout the mindset. But it's not, the point is, the knowledge isn't fixed or static. It's impermanent. It's a process of change. But that change doesn't mean that one loses the definitive knowledge. It means that it continues. Impermanence is the nature of anything, whether the anything is a mental event or a material thing. Makes no difference. So why don't we get this point? Well, it's simply because if we continue with the mindset of definitive knowledge and its instances, the instances resemble one another to the point where the worldly mind draws the conclusion that it is one fixed, static mindset. One fails to see that definitive knowledge, as everything else, is also just a process of constant change. One fails to see the impermanence of it, but impermanence, as was said, doesn't mean that one loses the knowledge in question. It's just a matter of describing how it happens.
Rinda Juntunto, Rinda Yimba Johnson, then Penna, Nishi, Sakente Yang, Metapa Yimba Johnson, then Nepar Shipetento, Check Gamba in a Koya, Jaya, Sone, Nepe turned and went to Churumbiarwa.
You see, the definitive knowledge may, if it's, let's say, the definitive knowledge of something, let's say emptiness, the practitioner, having arrived at a definitive knowledge of emptiness, can then cultivate knowledge of emptiness in a definitive manner, in that he's truly understood what emptiness is about, to the point where later on he may attain a direct knowledge of it. He may realize emptiness, at which point the definitive knowledge used changes into realization of what is known. So a definitive knowledge is not something fixed or static or permanent. The word definitive doesn't point to that. The word definitive rather points to that one truly knows the something in question.
Tandang aranso long la kande shargin do tang perna. Nghe dong la yeb chusö ji yor wande. Chusö de nong wa tsam ha se pela ran chusö jin do tene nga chen zin nang chi yor wa.
Yeah, and so what? Tini?
Tate tong ba ni du je ge ri pa ge chik ke ang de nang tsam sig le.
That taking on a condition.
Tate je ma shu sha.
Mari, dinga
Perna
Yen song la.
chusö de nga zo la tanda 통도 gar 통도 dosana. 추서 코란 플라 뎀바chen de de wa dawji 통도 와. 다들 릭베 당고식 식네. 릭바튼 저런 예파신 정용도. 데플라 나오래 마도. 나오에 텐도 뎀바네 바 타지 채운 것도 와. 된 최체단 형태 때 농화점래 뎀바메 로텔라 감차시 조용나 된 농도 성주 그따와 생기는 건도 줄투고요 와
강기 탱라
농동 성주 세 그따와 된 건도 줄투고요 와 로기다
로기게라 송주 톡바 말이 당이 시다마 송나시
예시에 감나
yeah
된 난저 때 똥 그러와
yeah tenet Khenpo Rinpoche takes the example of the clock on his table. All of us see it as a clock of a small size, placed on the surface of the table. We see it as a real and static thing. It's there now. It's the same clock that was on the table a while ago, and it will stay the same. Day after day, week after week. That's our perception of it. Now, by way of logic and reasoning, one can come to understand that this clock isn't as real as it right now seems to be. By way of investigating it as to what it in fact is or isn't. And that process of reasoning may, if the practitioner is skilled, result in a definitive knowledge of that the clock isn't at all as real as one thought it to be previously. In fact, it's simply an appearance which has no reality of its own. It's essenceless, insubstantial, and unreal. It's empty of any kind of real reality. And then, once that definitive knowledge is at hand, the practitioner uses that in his meditation and finally realizes that all things are but both appearance and emptiness. There isn't a single thing that has a real reality. Khenpo had the wish to dedicate his life to meditation after his academic training. Nevertheless, out of devotion for the 16th Karmapa, he spends his life teaching around the world. Can we conclude that devotion is more important than meditation? Dikhenso?
Shizu. Tate sosu ke pena samatandarawa. Devout senge teyang meditation an du.
Well, it's individual how one understands devotion, meditation, and the like. In fact, devotion is part of meditation. So, devotion and meditation aren't really two separate things. They go hand in hand, as it were.
Perna meditation sayati ngone kwa jacham shivuchil gongba shigore mato slandu chi gam yana undawchil mikpate de chiku thanda marwa.
One has to understand meditation in a broader sense than just limiting it to visualizing a godlike figure, as it were, or counting cycles of breath, for example. Just doing these things isn't really meditation, or meditation isn't limited to just doing, for example, one of these two things. Mm-hmm. It's something that is much, much broader than that.
Meditation say
meditation in Buddhism is to be understood to concern a process where the practitioner familiarizes himself with something. And of course, that he would do by way of cultivating that something.
Tene yungkin tenzola da gamchen segi yorwa ngone chö shama chingken so tende chila mangyo yorwa nganzo nashi che kasakala do chö che dik che de yingwa ki ra yorwa ndida
kare yore yingwa Now meditation in its broadest sense would be applicable to, for example, individuals who have given up a worldly way of life and therefore simply removed themselves from the world, dwelling in secluded places where they are satisfied with having just the bare essentials of life, and where they spend their time meditating, as it were. In terms of traveling the world, teaching the Buddha Dharma, that's a slightly different situation, in that simply by virtue of having to go from A to B all the time makes for a lot of distraction. Time is taken away from you in terms of how much time you have available to spend meditating. You spend a lot of time traveling, long distances. You then arrive somewhere where you're settled in, you have to acquaint yourself with the people there, you have meetings with them about the program. So that way of life makes for a lot of distraction. It's not that the traveling teacher is looking for distraction is rather forced upon him by way of the circumstances of doing what he's doing.
Dorsu duna pena retreat chigla never bachilan de chung chuxie chene
Ne empachikla.
de pachun chung chuxiebu
Lasso.
chene mese chasang jeba yinayandra lame kar si ne mese chasang chuxien song deba yinayandra lame kar si ne mese korang leka chi le deba yinayandra
Leka chigle tebe ina kasumi.
ta office ge leka le khungba sa phe do lo
Oreta.
ta khar cheba yin
Gampanang la so.
ya gampanang khar cheba yin yang choso chi ge na yin ta ga ko khar cheba yin yang thoma rang ge ko nong ma ta ye da ha chang ge chim pu ko nong la rondeur zan man de was
Lasso.
nipa shawat le shug yong the gabrang la jal che gre gabre shedong che gre ram men da yong gre nga zo le tang bo ra wa tin de ti wang du ma song ha chi ta ni nga che shue de chum de ji tön shong na te te du nga jal che ni nga shi da yo
Lasso.
대간나 신게 다야 지금 메게 준노 롱저 라서고 톱잖아 망도 톰데 삼바시라 레시그데
Tagyo no long chu condition.
지금 메지가 퓨셔나 땀 몽보 탄데 고근도 튕게도 와 직보체 고근도 nga 고근도 튼
Lasso.
벤나 텐데 겐가 시라 여데 그래 디인데 년가 여 같은 거랑 하고네 됐으면서 땅tum나 때 간이네 오늘 직발해 상도
Retreat on chikpare.
야야 년가 때 사섭제에 하장 개침 보셔
Now, whether a person spends his life in seclusion, meditating, having few desires, and being content with the bare essentials of life, or whether a person follows the instructions of his guru to, for example, travel the world and teach the Buddha Dharma, or work in the administration of a monastery, which would involve a lot of office work as well as, for example, constructing new buildings as to the monastic compound and so on. Or if someone spends his life establishing one or many Dharma centers for the good of all, as it were, and according to the instructions of his guru. Before one does whatever one does of all these options and any other option, it is exceedingly important to, before starting whatever one is about to start, pay attention to one's mindset, to one's motivation for doing the task one has been instructed to accomplish, in order to find out that one doesn't or rather see to that one doesn't harbor any selfish motives. The second thing one must at all times also be very alert about is that when afflictive, obscuring states happen, simply because of circumstances, you can be completely exhausted. You have traveled from A to B, a 12-hour flight. You arrive at wherever, and people there may not see to your needs very well, and everything is just becoming a bit difficult. Then one might get irritated, even angry. Or if one has done well and is praised and the like, pride may happen. These things will happen. None of us have yet attained Buddha, the enlightened state. Therefore, those emotions will happen, they will arise due to circumstances. It's very important that one do not give in to these states as they happen. Do not let them ever govern your mind and take over. Recognize that those states of mind have occurred, but do not give in to them. And it's in particular, Khenpo Rinpoche explains, a great risk of pride when one has accomplished something well. Also, there may be situations where individuals are showing their appreciation for one's efforts, in terms of making an offering. Some make perhaps large offerings. It's also at that point very important not to let desire start governing you, namely that you would like an even larger offering. You would like to have a more splendid lifestyle or environment and the like. There are many risks in terms of traveling the world, teaching the Buddha Dharma, or being a member of an administration of a monastery and the like. And one needs to recognize those risks. One needs to know that one is at the beginning of the path to enlightenment, and therefore those states of mind will happen in certain circumstances. So recognizing and accepting all of that, one works with it so that a negative impact doesn't come to pass. Then, if a person is able to do that, then all the work he did won't be tainted by worldly motives, by afflictive, obscuring states and the like. And one could perhaps then say, Khenpo Rinpoche says, that there isn't a big difference between what is accomplished in that way and what is accomplished in secluded meditation throughout a lifetime.
Perna Gampopa la Milarepe teaching Tamat Nonche Rida Memakindu Taught Payu Bachi
Wounded.
Taught Payu Bachi Songyot.
Now, Gampopa, in terms of his very last instruction to Milarepa before Milarepa parted for the seclusion of the mountains. Gampopa at that point gave the following advice: live like a wounded wild animal. Now, an animal who lives in the wild and who is wounded is exceedingly attentive to his surroundings, what happens to him, and so on, in order to survive. And this is the sort of level of attention one needs to pay to one's own mindset, one's behavior, and everything else when doing whatever one does. Till one has a direct knowledge of emptiness, till one has realized emptiness, the army of 84,000 afflictive, obscuring states are still in action. That's quite a large army. Ask yourselves, do I need to be attentive or not? Well, the answer should be self-evident. So, the Four Seals summarize all Buddha's teachings. Why do they not seem to include love and compassion, which are so important aspects of the Buddhist path? Well, we haven't gotten to that seal yet. Sorry. It's the third. The third of the Four Seals, which primarily speaks of the fact that all things are empty of a self-entity. Love and compassion will be part of the explanations there in that context.
Well,
it's also the fact of time restraint here. We have a set number of days available, and Khenpo Rinpoche said at the outset that in terms of the Four Seals, if one were to go into the ins and outs of them in great detail, that would require many more days. So you have to be aware that there is much more to the Four Seals than can be explained during this course, in that the course has a time restraint, simply. Khenpo Rinpoche says if impermanence doesn't strike in terms of his life, if he's not, if he doesn't die before too long, if he continues to be in somewhat in good health, then he welcomes you to join the summer courses in Dakpo Kagyeling in the future. There may be further explanations, more detailed explanations during these courses there.
Tene Dakpo Kagyeling sanek short la pe sasichibore chudin rosaksar.
And Khenpo Rinpoche adds the area where Dakpo Kagyeling is situated is landscape-wise a very beautiful area, and it's also a tourist area. It's a very pleasant and beautiful surrounding. Most people, if not all, enjoy their stay there.
제가 로송 춘종제 육고공나 양 tourism camp 육초그래 첨보제 육고트나 연연 사항이 약고요.
And finance-wise, for those whose finances are a bit tight, there are low-price accommodations available, a lot of low-price accommodation. And for those who are not on a tight budget and who also want some comfort and the like, there are high-end hotels, if that's the kind of place one would like to stay in. And there are so many good restaurants as well, in different price ranges. There is something for everyone.
Vena tongchena chegiyor kama sampelina. Tene che tu se yun kin retire pe deva chur to na yun kin so. Choson dina no pe shoda. De tongche pen zebuyor. Europe no tongchen se shwe.
Then a great deal of the rest of the year, no, not the entire year, Khenpo stays here in the city of Vienna. And for those of you who have time, you can come here to Karma Sampling and attend weekend courses and find out about the details of the Four Seals and other Buddhist topics. And the city of Vienna is very pleasant. And there are also many interesting places to visit while here. So, for example, people who are retired, it could be recommended to travel here if you're interested in more details as well as visiting the city. So that's all for this session of questions and answers.